Abrimos la sesión de preguntas. Invitamos al profesor Jack Green y Chris Lane que pasen al frente y a la profesora Beatriz Bragoni, quien moderará esta mesa.
¿Ya? Sí. Bueno, vamos a respetar el orden de, la exposición, de los expositores y dar lectura. Yo voy a leer las preguntas, los expositores harán sus respuestas, pero en conjunto, para no interrumpir las exposiciones y que al mismo tiempo los expositores puedan hilar y relacionar las mismas preguntas. Las preguntas que llegaron para el profesor Green son tres. La primera es, el ejemplo, dice, de la actitud de Jacobo II es llamativo, que es algo que él señaló en su exposición. ¿Qué papel pudo haber jugado la religión en determinar la política colonial? La otra tiene que ver con lo siguiente. ¿Cuál fue la importancia de las asambleas de las colonias y cuáles fueron los resultados que obtuvieron estos? Y la tercera se vincula con el tema de la identidad. ¿Cómo se elabora en las otras colonizaciones británicas, las de Asia y de África? Y en tal sentido, el papel de la raza y no la religión es el sustento de la identidad. Bien.
Well, I'll take these up in no particular order. With James II, who of course was Catholic, that was part of his downfall. He wanted to establish toleration for Catholics along with an absolutist monarchy. But this had relatively little effect in the overseas empire. It was another one. Okay, but I'll answer the others first, then you can tell me. All right. There were very few Catholics in either North America or in the West Indies, except for the small colony of Montserrat in the Leeward Islands, which had a very large number of Irish people who were, many of them, Catholics. There were about 30% of the population of Maryland was Catholic. It was founded as a colony that would tolerate Catholics, but the presence of Catholics is so small that it doesn't have much effect. The Glorious Revolution, however, essentially enshrined the populous populations all over the empire to put Catholics under severe disabilities. And this was particularly true in England itself and in Scotland, and also later on after 1707, but particularly in Ireland, where the population was heavily Catholic, but dominated by a minority Protestant population for almost 100 years, or 110 years actually, in so-called Protestant ascendancy. In the North American and West Indian colonies, however, the number of Catholics continued to be very small. So the second question, what did the assemblies do? And the answer is todos. They did everything. There were no cedulas issued from London to guide their direction. The laws were all made by these assemblies. The governor had to give his assent, but since his salary or the success of his government were often dependent upon grants from these assemblies, most governors were very cooperative. It was only in the later 18th century that many of them were actually sacked for disobeying their instructions and so forth. Even those were dependent for their the financial support of the province, in each province, of the assembly. The result of this was quite significant because it created and helped perpetuate, rather, these enclaves of provincial authority that were largely under the control of the leaders of the settler population in these legislatures. This was, as Adam Smith remarked, a kind of republican government in practice long before anybody thought of themselves as republicans. As long as the Crown respected these arrangements and let the assemblies control the domestic political lives of their respective polities, there was a great love for the English monarchy. And in fact, in the 1760s and 70s, the legislatures and other protesters all appealed to the king as a person who would rescue them from the actions of these evil ministers around him. But of course the king was thoroughly socialized to the results of the Glorious Revolution by that time and turned a deaf ear to the colonial protesters. The third question about the extension of these rights of Englishmen to the rest of the globe. This is a very interesting question. I've just published a book, or I will be publishing it in a few days, called Exclusionary Empire, which takes up the question of the transfer of English liberty overseas. And there's a magnificent chapter by Robert Travers on India, in which he shows what a live issue it was for those Englishmen who went to India to be able to have their identities as Englishmen and their liberties as Englishmen guaranteed to them. Now, in the end, because there were so few of these people, they never achieved any kind of the instruments of consensual governance that were achieved in the First Empire. But they did achieve a system of courts that were separate from the indigenous population as a rule, in which the principles of English law applied. So that aspect, rather deep aspect, of their Englishness persisted. And this went well beyond India to all the new possessions and the English people in those new possessions, where the courts ran with juries of other English people, or co-opted peoples, and where the courts operated under the conditions of English law. Now, what's the fourth question now?
Llegó una pregunta a último momento. El impulso colonizador inglés y estadounidense se fundamenta en la libertad. ¿No cree usted que en gran medida se ha confundido el valor de la libertad con la condición de la propiedad privada del ser con el tener?
It's not confused with it. It's isomorphic. Liberty meant property, private property, for these people, and only those people with private property were entitled to a kind of civic role, to enjoy the full privileges of the English. So that property is absolutely central. It's the most fundamental thing about this exclusionary societies that the English were creating all over the New World and then later over the rest of the world.
Bueno, gracias. Pasamos entonces a leer las preguntas para Chris Lane. ¿Qué explica la limitada expansión territorial de la dominación colonial británica a las llamadas 13 colonias en América del Norte? Y la otra tiene dos preguntas. Si es adecuado decir que la historia de Estados Unidos empieza con la conquista y colonización de las tierras por los ingleses, por lo tanto dice con la anexión de las tierras a Inglaterra, o empieza con la independencia en pro de la República, y cómo llamar la historia que va antes de la independencia.
Bueno, gracias por las preguntas. Las respuestas no van a ser muy largas porque las preguntas son medio limitadas. ¿Qué explica la limitación de la expansión territorial en las 13 colonias. Tiene varias partes, pero al principio la falta de riqueza mineral, no encontraron oro, buscaban oro al principio, los colonizadores de Virginia y de otras partes también no encontraron imperios indígenas. Entonces la expansión encontró, o digamos los primeros aventureros, como dice el profesor Green, encontraron una situación distinta, un desafío para sobrevivir, unos inviernos muy duros, y después de unas alianzas con los indígenas, les dieron cuenta que el imperio francés tenía su Nueva Francia hacia el norte, y las zonas indígenas entonces sirvieron como una zona desmilitarizada o intermedio entre las colonias ingleses y los franceses. Entonces hablamos de una tierra intermedia que era prohibido pasar la línea de las montañas de Apalachia hasta después de la guerra de 7 años, y con la incorporación de la Canadá eso cambió, pero poco a poco. Entonces empezó la expansión hacia el oeste muy lentamente y muy tarde, y hacia el sur, como dice el profesor Green, hacia Georgia, Florida, también con unas colonias de esfuerzo monárquica. En la segunda, la conceptualización no anacrónica de la historia. Es adecuado decir que la historia de Estados Unidos empieza con la conquista y colonización de las tierras por los ingleses o por la República misma. Yo prefiero decir que la historia la historia moderna empieza más o menos en la época de Colón, y podemos hablar de continuidades y descontinuidades, la creación de naciones como unas brechas muy importantes, pero hablar estrictamente de los Estados Unidos sí seguramente empieza con